The streets of Birmingham, England, packed today with fans who wanted to say their goodbyes to Ozzy Osbourne.
Osbourne's funeral just happened, and while the headlines captured the crowd, the music, and the tributes, you didn't see everything. There were moments the cameras missed, small details that only surfaced later, and when you find out what really happened during those final goodbyes, it'll change how you remember it all. This wasn't just another rock star funeral. It was emotional, it was raw, and for those who were paying attention, it was shocking. Let's dive into the little things you missed about Ozzy Osbourne's funeral. Final wishes. Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary frontman of Black Sabbath, passed away on July 22, 2025, at the age of 76. He was at home in Buckinghamshire, surrounded by his wife Sharon and their children. According to a statement from the family, he had been battling multiple health complications related to Parkinson's disease, spinal issues, and other age-related problems. His final days were spent quietly, with close family staying by his side. There were no dramatic incidents. The family later confirmed that his death was peaceful. Ozzy had been dealing with health struggles for several years. Back in 2020, he publicly revealed his Parkinson's diagnosis and had undergone multiple surgeries on his spine after a fall in 2019. Despite long periods of rehabilitation, his mobility remained limited. By early 2025, insiders said he was largely confined to a wheelchair and required full-time care at home. Reports claimed that in the last 2 months, his condition had sharply declined. According to close sources, he had privately said goodbye to several friends and longtime collaborators in June.
People like that, make concerts happen. And I don't know what to say, man. I've been laid up for like fucking 6 years. And it's so, you've got no idea how I feel.
His death came only weeks after what was described as his final public appearance, a farewell concert held in Birmingham, his birthplace, on July 5th. That show marked the end of his decades-long music career. He performed seated but made it clear to the crowd that he wanted to end things on his own terms. The show was symbolic more than it was musical, and while some questioned whether he would make it through the set, he did. That appearance was carefully planned, and family members were said to be on site in case anything went wrong. After the performance, Ozzy returned home and stayed out of the public eye until his death. Before he passed, Ozzy had spoken several times about what he wanted his funeral to be like. He had said in interviews that he didn't want a sad, mournful event. Instead, he wanted people to laugh, drink, and play Sabbath. He reportedly told his family that if anyone cried too much, he'd come back and haunt them for being boring. Sharon confirmed in past interviews that her husband wanted something that would celebrate his life rather than dwell on his death. Family sources say that Ozzy was involved in planning parts of his funeral before he died. He had chosen songs he wanted played, which included some of his own classics, along with music that inspired him as a young man. He reportedly requested no traditional church service and didn't want eulogies that sounded like PR speeches. His instructions, according to family insiders, were simple. Keep it real. No fake crying. The Osbourne family did not announce his death to the public immediately. It was first shared privately with friends, former bandmates, and longtime associates. Media outlets confirmed the news late in the afternoon through statements released by the family. Fans began gathering outside his home in Buckinghamshire within hours. Some brought flowers, some carried records, and a few stood in silence without saying a word. Online tributes flooded in from every corner of the world, from former bandmates to global celebrities, all acknowledging what Ozzy had meant to the history of rock. Behind the scenes, Sharon began working with organizers in Birmingham to coordinate a public tribute. She knew how much the city meant to her husband, and reports say she was firm in making sure it would be a proper send-off. But the private side of things was kept under tight control. A family-only event was said to be held in the days following his passing, though no photos or details were released. Everything the family did at this stage followed Ozzy's instructions. He wanted no drama, just music, memories, and meaning. But is this really how it all went down? The procession. On July 30th, 2025, the city of Birmingham came to a full stop. What had been in the works for several days became reality that morning. A public funeral procession to honor Ozzy Osbourne. The route was mapped out by the family with help from local officials, and it reflected key locations from Ozzy's life. The procession started in the Aston neighborhood, where he grew up, and moved through city streets toward Broad Street, where a bench bearing his name sits across from the Black Sabbath Bridge. Crowds started forming hours before the motorcade began. By the time the hearse appeared, thousands had lined the sidewalks, standing in silence, holding signs, and wearing shirts that bore Ozzy's image. Many were visibly emotional, but the mood matched the spirit of celebration Ozzy had requested. People clapped, chanted his name, and played his music from portable speakers. The tribute was public, loud, and unmistakably tied to the city's identity. Local police blocked off roads to allow the motorcade to pass without interruption. Mounted officers led the route, followed by a single black hearse carrying the casket. The vehicle moved slowly, allowing fans to catch a glimpse and throw flowers, handwritten letters, and small personal tributes onto the road. One man tossed a pair of worn-out boots, wrapped in plastic, with a note that read, "You walked with us, now rest." Another woman held up a vinyl copy of Blizzard of Oz and sobbed silently. The city council approved the installation of temporary viewing platforms near key points of the route. The largest one was near Villa Park, the stadium of Aston Villa Football Club, Ozzy's favorite team. On that stretch, fans sang the club anthem and a local brass band played a slow version of Iron Man. The moment stood out. It felt like a final hometown salute. Halfway through the route, as the hearse passed through the city center, the crowd began chanting Ozzy's name in unison. The sound echoed between buildings. The chants were not organized, they just started, and people followed. That moment, according to those in attendance, felt less like a celebrity funeral and more like a folk hero's farewell. Streetlights were dimmed for the occasion, and large screens showed archived footage of Ozzy performing in the 1970s and early 2000s. The Osbourne family did not walk in the procession, but followed the hearse in a series of black vehicles. Their presence was low-key, and windows were tinted. Reports later confirmed that the family had chosen to keep their distance at this stage of the tribute to give the city room to mourn on its own terms. They were watching, but not leading. Vendors popped up near the start and end points of the route, selling unofficial shirts, posters, and memorabilia. Some locals criticized the commercialization of the event, but most ignored it. For many, this was the only chance they'd have to say goodbye, and they wanted to take something home with them. By the end of the route, as the motorcade slowed near the bridge bearing the Black Sabbath name, the mood shifted. People stopped shouting. Some began singing softly. A few lit candles, even in daylight. The city allowed flower piles to grow along the sidewalk. Sanitation workers were instructed not to clear anything for at least 48 hours. It wasn't a royal procession or a state funeral. It was something else, part rock tribute, part civic event, part personal farewell. It looked messy at times, but that only made it feel more authentic. This was a city saying goodbye to one of its own, in a language it knew well: music, noise, and unfiltered emotion. At the bridge. As the public procession came to a close, the Osbourne family made their way to one private moment that meant more than anything else that day. At the end of the route stood the Black Sabbath Bridge, one of the most iconic landmarks in Birmingham. This was where Ozzy Osbourne had been honored years earlier, with a plaque and bench dedicated in his name. It was a fan-driven tribute that the city later adopted. For Ozzy's family, this was the true heart of the farewell. Sharon Osbourne arrived first, dressed in all black, with a single string of pearls and dark sunglasses. She walked slowly, surrounded by close security, and held a bouquet of purple flowers in her left hand. Sharon had been by Ozzy's side through every health crisis, every scandal, and every recovery. This moment, in many ways, was personal, and it showed. Following closely behind were her children, Jack, Kelly, Amy, and stepson Lewis. Each of them was dressed in their own understated but symbolic way. Kelly wore round purple-tinted glasses, a clear nod to her father's signature look. Jack had a silver cross pinned to his lapel. Amy wore a small bat-shaped brooch on her collar, while Louis was spotted in a black tie patterned with subtle purple skulls. Every piece was a reference. Every one of them told part of Ozzy's story. Once the family reached the bench, they formed a quiet semicircle. Sharon was the first to step forward. She placed her flowers on the seat, then removed her sunglasses and stood in silence. According to photographers who kept their distance, she was visibly shaking. She then touched the backrest of the bench and held her hand there for several seconds before stepping back. The moment seemed rehearsed, but it wasn't. It looked more like something she had played over in her head for days, but hadn't practiced until now. Jack stepped forward next. He placed a folded piece of paper on the bench and walked away without looking back. Insiders say it was a personal letter to his father, handwritten, and not intended for public release. Jack has always been vocal about his relationship with Ozzy, especially in interviews where he described their bond as chaotic but close. This gesture was for closure. Kelly, who had stayed close to Sharon until that point, finally approached the bench and sat beside the flowers for a moment. She didn't say anything, but leaned forward, resting her hand lightly on the wood. A few minutes later, she whispered something no one could hear, then got up and rejoined the group. No tears were visible, but the moment was heavy. Amy and Louis followed, each laying their own tributes. No one made speeches. No one called attention to themselves. The entire act lasted about 10 minutes, and then they turned to leave. The security detail, positioned several feet behind them, began moving once the family was ready. But before they stepped away, Sharon turned back for one last look. That final glance, just a few seconds, was caught on camera. But more importantly, it captured the tone of the entire tribute. While the public had their chants and signs, the family chose something quieter. There were no microphones, no flashbulbs in their faces. It was just them, a bench, a few personal symbols, and memories they couldn't say out loud. The Osbournes left the bridge quietly, without addressing the media. They didn't pause to speak to fans. That moment wasn't for the world. It was for them. And even in the presence of cameras and reporters, they managed to keep it exactly that, a private goodbye, in a public place, on their own terms. But there was something else, something a very few people noticed. The photos. It wasn't until the photos started circulating online that people noticed something unusual. Here's what you missed at Ozzy Osbourne's funeral, and it's shocking. Initially, the attention was focused on the crowd, the procession, and the location. But then a series of close-up images began making their way through social media and news outlets. In them, Sharon Osbourne could be seen wearing a thin gold chain around her neck. Hanging from it was what appeared to be a simple but unmistakable item: Ozzy's wedding ring. This wasn't just any ring. According to insiders close to the family, the ring she wore was not the original band from their 1982 wedding, but the one exchanged during their 2017 vow renewal ceremony. The couple had gone through a rough period that year, following public reports of infidelity and temporary separation, but they renewed their vows in a private ceremony in Las Vegas, recommitting to each other after 35 years of marriage. That second ring had become a representation of survival, forgiveness, and permanence. Seeing that ring hanging from Sharon's neck out in the open was a quiet message, a reminder that their relationship had endured everything and remained intact until the very end. Sharon didn't speak about it. She didn't gesture to it. But she didn't hide it either. And that's what made it powerful. It was one of the few truly unexpected things that came out of the funeral events, and it caught fans and reporters off guard. The decision to wear the ring this way wasn't accidental. People close to the family said Sharon had planned to do it from the moment Ozzy died. She reportedly told someone in the inner circle that it was the only way she would get through that day. It was about carrying something physical with her, something that made the absence less crushing. Those who know her said she didn't want to make a speech, didn't want to walk behind the hearse, and didn't want to pose for any photographs. But the ring was non-negotiable. At the same time, there was something else that drew attention: Jack Osbourne's behavior during the procession. Observers noticed that Jack stayed extremely close to Sharon the entire day. More than once, he was seen guiding her by the arm or stepping in to create space when photographers got too close. One clip showed him gently adjusting Sharon's coat as the wind picked up. Another showed him reaching out as she paused, placing his hand just above hers without saying a word. Insiders later shared that Jack had taken on a more protective role in the final weeks of Ozzy's life. He had reportedly moved into a guest house on the family property to be nearby during his father's last days. He handled many of the logistics after the death, including coordination with city officials in Birmingham and communications with the extended family. While Sharon was the public figure, it was Jack who took over the mechanics of the arrangements. Friends say he did it not because he had to, but because he knew his mother wouldn't make it through without someone holding the line. Kelly, while visibly emotional, stayed further back during much of the event. But her expression, often captured by cameras, told its own story. She looked hollowed out. She didn't speak to reporters, and she didn't post anything on social media that day. Instead, the post came a day later, in the form of a single photo of a vintage microphone with a caption that simply read, "Silence says more." Fans interpreted it as her tribute to the man who gave her both life and a name in the music world. In the end, the chain, the ring, Jack's support, and Sharon's silence combined into one image that ended up carrying more weight than any speech could have. It was grief, loyalty, and finality, all wrapped into one moment nobody was prepared for. The reactions. In the hours following Ozzy Osbourne's funeral, tributes continued to pour in from around the world. Rock legends, former collaborators, and fans shared memories, performances, and personal stories. Though the public procession in Birmingham had already said a lot, it was the following reactions that painted a clearer picture of what Ozzy meant to the music industry and to the people around him. Many fellow musicians responded immediately. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's longtime bandmate from Black Sabbath, released a short but heartfelt statement calling him irreplaceable. He shared a photo of the two of them backstage from their last tour and wrote that they had spoken only days before Ozzy's passing. Geezer Butler, the band's bassist, offered a quieter response. According to people close to him, he spent the day of the funeral in private and declined all interview requests. He later posted a message on social media thanking fans for keeping the legacy alive. Outside the band, others from across the rock and metal world offered public reactions. James Hetfield of Metallica called Ozzy a blueprint. Axl Rose, known for rarely speaking on public events, wrote a personal message on his band's website about seeing Black Sabbath for the first time as a teenager and how it changed his life. Lars Ulrich said in a radio interview that Ozzy's death felt like a chapter closing for everyone in heavy music. Back in the UK, Birmingham's mayor issued a statement recognizing Ozzy's cultural and civic contributions. The city council reportedly announced that a permanent mural would be commissioned in the Aston neighborhood, near where the funeral route began. Locals began leaving candles, photos, and handwritten messages under the Black Sabbath Bridge, even after the formal events ended. Cleanup crews were instructed to leave these items untouched for several days. At the same time, fans across the world organized their own tributes. In Los Angeles, a group gathered outside the Sunset Strip's Rainbow Bar and Grill, where Ozzy had been a regular for years. They held a candlelight tribute, blasting Mr. Crowley and Mama, "I'm Coming Home" through portable speakers. In Tokyo, a group of fans gathered near the Tower Records building and displayed hand-drawn portraits of Ozzy. In São Paulo, graffiti artists painted a tribute mural on a warehouse wall featuring Ozzy's face and lyrics from Crazy Train. Inside the Osbourne circle, there was a clear effort to avoid extended media appearances. Sharon stayed out of the spotlight after the procession, and there were no immediate interviews or public statements from the family beyond the original announcement. Insiders said this was intentional. The family wanted space before re-entering public life, and they had nothing more to add at that moment. According to someone close to them, everything they needed to say was said already. Though the public ceremonies were over, the response made it clear that Ozzy's influence wouldn't fade quickly. His voice, his image, and his story were still everywhere, on shirts, on signs, and in songs playing out of speakers in cities across the globe. The funeral had ended, but the echo hadn't. Private farewell. After the large-scale public funeral in Birmingham, insiders say that the Osbourne family will soon hold a private service to say their final goodbyes to Ozzy Osbourne. While no official announcement has been made, sources close to the family claim that plans for a small, invitation-only gathering were already in place even before the public procession happened. According to these reports, the event will be held in Buckinghamshire, likely at a private chapel near the family estate. This farewell will not be a continuation of the public spectacle. It's expected to be limited to immediate family, longtime friends, and a handful of close associates who were part of Ozzy's inner circle. Sharon is reportedly overseeing every detail, sticking closely to Ozzy's final wishes. He was clear, according to those close to him, that he did not want a second funeral that felt staged or formal. His request was for something quiet, simple, and honest. The private service is expected to take place sometime this week, though the exact date is being kept confidential. Attendees will likely receive very little notice in advance. According to one insider, there's no program, no dress code, no speeches planned. It'll be what Ozzy wanted. It's believed that Sharon and her children will each play a part in the event. Sources say Jack is preparing to read from The Prophet, a book Ozzy often quoted during interviews and family dinners. Kelly, who previously recorded the song Changes with her father, may sing a short verse as a tribute, but nothing has been confirmed. Amy, who has mostly stayed out of public life, is expected to bring a handwritten letter or personal item to leave with the casket. Lewis, who has always maintained a low profile, is reportedly staying close to Sharon and will remain involved in the planning, though not publicly. The burial itself is expected to follow immediately after the service. It will reportedly take place on private land near the family's property. Ozzy had made it known that he didn't want to be buried in a public cemetery or any place that would turn into a tourist attraction. His preference was for somewhere quiet, where his family could visit without fanfare or intrusion. There is no indication that this private farewell will be documented or filmed. In fact, according to insiders, the family has made it clear to everyone involved that no cameras or press will be allowed near the site. This has been described as a hard rule, not a request. The goal is to create a moment that belongs to the family, away from the attention and chaos that has followed them for decades. So, do you think there is something else people might have missed about the public funeral? Let us know in the comments.